All right, well, our question for tonight: why does the Bible teach that there's nothing new under the sun, that everything has existed before? Is this a verse you're familiar with? From the book of Ecclesiastes, which is one of my favorite books of the Bible. I don't know if you're familiar with Ecclesiastes. It may not be your favorite devotional reading necessarily, but I always enjoy it when I get to read it because I think it offers a really helpful and needed perspective on life. So I want to invite you to open up your Bible to Ecclesiastes. That's after the book of Psalms, Proverbs, then Ecclesiastes is the next book. And we'll look at a couple different passages in Ecclesiastes as we do this, but we're going to start off first in chapter 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. If you needed some uplifting reading for today,
this is not it.
We can start off with verse 2. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So there you go. There's your feel-good verse for the day. You can put it on a sticker and on your favorite greeting card, right? You know, like send a card to somebody in the mail when they're sick. And they open it up and it's like, you know, your signature, and Tim puts his dollar in, and then they read the little verse on the side that says meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless, right? Now, so why would he say that? Let's read on in verse 3. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are worrisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. And then we get to our verses that are quoted here tonight. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow him. So there's nothing new under the sun is how these verses in the beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes starts off. Like I said, that seems like a real encouraging message. Like, okay, who wants to read this? This is kind of depressing, right? So there's nothing new, and what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. What's the theme of this passage that we just read? If you could summarize the main idea of what we've said.
The externals of life aren't as good as they appear to be.
Okay.
He's depressed.
You just keep doing the same things over, like things my daddy did, I do.
Uh-huh.
I think it's the
Yeah,
cycle
there you
of
go.
It's
life.
just like, yeah.
The cycle of life. You come, you go, you know.
Yeah.
It starts
but
and
there-
finishes.
Yeah, Miss Betty really hit the nail on the head with what she said. It's again and again. It keeps happening over and over and over again, right? That's what it says. Generations come and generations go. One generation comes, the next generation comes, and the old generation goes, and it goes on and on and on without end. The earth remains forever, but the generations keep coming. The sun rises and sets and hurries back to where it rises, so it can rise and set again, right? Again and again. Every day the sun rises and sets, and nothing ever seems to change. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, round and round it goes, everything returning. Then it talks about the water cycle, how the streams flow into the sea, and then somehow it gets back to the beginning where it started in the streams, and then it flows back into the sea again. And this is just pointing out one of the realities of life, is that we do the same thing again and again. Nature does the same thing again and again. The seasons come and the seasons go. Summer, fall, winter, spring, summer again, and let's do it all over again. Daily routines, all this kind of stuff. This is what life is like. And there is a certain perspective that you can look at this life, and that's what Ecclesiastes is about, that says this is just, it's meaningless. It just happens again and again, and it seems like we're never actually accomplishing anything. We're never seeing anything new. What our grandfathers did and our parents did is what we're doing now is what our children are going to do and what our grandchildren are going to do after we're gone. So, why is this in the Bible, right? That's kind of where the question is. So let's also look at 3:15. I've got that one on the screen for here. This also says a very similar thing. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. Meaning what will be in the future, it has been before, and God will call the past to account. So there's nothing new under the sun, is the teaching of the book of Ecclesiastes. Now,
does that mean like, all right, because they're all talking about the melting of the ice caps, that's been done before then?
well, I think scientifically you can certainly say that it has, because we know that Earth has warmed and cooled at different periods in its history. Now, I would give caution here that this is a book of poetry. You know in your Bible where you see a lot of lines indented, that's normally referring to a poetic section. And wisdom literature as a whole, it's a lot like we talk about in the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is not a set of, let's say, how did we say it back when we were in the series? It's not a book of universal laws, basically. It's a set of general principles, right? And that's the same thing that's true of wisdom literature in general, and that's what's true of Ecclesiastes. This is not saying universally there nothing new ever happens, nothing new is ever invented, because we know that certainly wouldn't be true. 100 years ago they didn't have computers. Now we have computers. So there's something new under the sun. Every time a world record is set in athletic competition, there's something new under the sun. The first time somebody ran a 4-minute mile, at least in competition that we know of. Maybe sometime in life before, there was somebody that ran a 4-minute mile out in, out in the...
Can you?
Yeah, it's possible. We just didn't know about it. But there is progress and there are new things that happen. That's certainly true. So this is not making a universal statement that absolutely everything that happens. Again, it's talking about the general principle of life. No matter what you see, the problems that you encounter, the evil that people decide to do, the way that countries and kingdoms and empires rise and fall, you can look back through history and see how all that stuff has happened before, and there's a lot of similarities and also some differences in each situation. But the repetitive nature of life, the mundane nature of life, is the focus of the book of Ecclesiastes. And that's why the theme of Ecclesiastes is meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So when we begin to understand what the book of Ecclesiastes is teaching, then we can understand why he would say there's nothing new under the sun. Because his emphasis is not on the subtle differences in all of these different areas that we can see. When there are new things, there's never been in the history of humankind another Johnny Tripp. He's the first one that's ever existed.
Praise God for that.
Only you could say that and get away with it.
So there was never one before him, there's only one now, and there's never going to be another one. God broke the mold, right? Yeah, you do hear people say that, don't you?
Hey, turn around. Right behind you.
Ain't pretty as I am.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's a general principle, and it's talking about what life is like. Now, when you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, it's really a fascinating book because it draws our attention back to the fact, it really puts us in our place, that we are just one generation in many generations. We are just a small part of life on this earth, and this world is going to go on without us when we're done here. we had a pastor's meeting a couple weeks ago up in Richmond, and the president of Gateway Theological Seminary, Gateway Baptist Theological Seminary, which just moved from San Francisco to, where did they move to? They were in San Francisco, and then they moved to somewhere else farther south in California. I can't remember exactly where they moved to. I think it's in the LA area, but anyway, he was teaching the group of pastors. It was a young pastors meeting, and he was just talking about how the world doesn't revolve around us. Our churches don't revolve around us. And he said, you know what would happen if you were to die tomorrow? They would have a nice service for you, and then they'd go on. You know, you are not essential to what happens. Everything is not going to fall apart if you're not there, which was a good reminder and a good reality check that, you know, sometimes as pastors we kind of think, oh, well, you know, the world's going to fall apart if we're not here to make sure everything's running along in place. And he said, no, that's really not what's going to happen. You're going to go on, and the same thing is true in all of our lives. There's going to come a time when ashes go to ashes and dust goes to dust, and our family and some friends will remember us and will mourn for us for a while, and then life is going to go on, and generations are going to come and generations are going to go. And meaningless in some sense. Everything's meaningless. Here's how the book of Ecclesiastes progresses. Let me point it out to you. He says there's nothing new under the sun. He tries all of these different things to find meaning in life. And he says there's not meaning in chasing after wisdom, because you can chase after all the wisdom you want and it doesn't satisfy. You can chase after pleasures all you want, and it's never going to be enough. That's never going to satisfy. And just foolishness, kind of the opposite of folly, of wisdom is folly. I don't care about wisdom. I'm just going to do whatever I want anyway. He said, I didn't find satisfaction there. Then he said, well, I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to produce, and I'm going to become wealthy and toil in advancement. He said, I didn't find satisfaction there. And all of these different things, I found that they were meaningless, a chasing after the wind. And that's one of the really vivid metaphors that the book of Ecclesiastes uses again and again, chasing after the wind. So you go chase after the wind, and just when you think you've caught it, right? Nope, it's a little bit ahead of you. So you got to keep running. No matter how fast you run, you never catch it. You never get there. And then also riches in chapter 5 is what he talks about. So all of these different things that people chase after in life, and here's what Solomon found, because most people think that Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, or that it's at least a collection of his sayings afterward. After he spent years of his life chasing after each one of these things, he says they're meaningless. And they're chasing after the wind, and they don't satisfy. And I really wanted to find out what it was in life that was really going to make me happy, was really going to satisfy, and was really going to please God. And I found that it was in none of these things. Now, he does come back around and he says there's a place for all of these things, and there's a place for enjoying life and for those kinds of things. But the ultimate purpose in life is not going to be found in any of them. And if you invest your life in them, you're going to find out how empty they really are, if that's where your ultimate goal is. So what does he also say in the book of Ecclesiastes? He says, why are all of these meaningless? So let's look at chapter 9, verse 2. Ecclesiastes 9:2. Back up to verse 1 to get the context. He says, so I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. Here's verse 2. All share a common destiny. The righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. All share a common destiny. And what's that common destiny? The grave, death. And at the end of life, it is death. No matter what life looked like for you, we're all going in the same direction. We're all going to the same destination. And this is not a perspective that you hear a lot in Scripture, because there is so much highlighting of God's desire for righteousness and the reward of righteousness, of receiving Christ's righteousness of heaven and hell for the unrighteous and for those who are evil and still in their sin. We focus a lot on that, but the meaninglessness and the repetitive nature of life, and the reality is that all of us, good and bad, we're still facing that we are heading toward the grave. So that's one of the reasons it's meaningless. And he also says that basically luck determines so much of what happens in life. So you can be wise, good, righteous, all of these things, and that doesn't guarantee that good stuff is going to happen to you in life. Sometimes the evil, treacherous, murderous, thieving, all the evil things you can think of, sometimes good stuff happens to those people instead of the good people. Look at chapter 9, verse 11. He says, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. So he's concerned about the random nature of life. It seems like in a world that God created, that things would make more sense than that. Like if you do good, you would be rewarded. If you do bad, bad things would happen to you. And then all of this would make sense. But he says it doesn't. Time and chance happen to all. And even somewhere close by in this context, he said this is one of the evil things about the world is that good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. And that's just what we face. In chapter 8, verse 14.
It really starts from the beginning, too, because we're born into different situations.
Yep.
We're all born into different kinds of families and different countries. I mean,
Yep.
so really, but it's like C.S. Lewis talks about in Mere Christianity. It's not so much where you begin, but it's how far you progress
Mm-hmm.
in spiritual maturity.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good perspective. Chapter 8, verse 14. There is something else meaningless that occurs on the earth. The righteous get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless. And then look at the next verse. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat, drink, and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. So in some ways, this book delivers a message about contentment. That if you're always striving, if you're always chasing after the wind, you're never going to be happy, you're never going to be satisfied, and your life is going to seem meaningless. But if you can accept the lot that God has given you in life, then there's going to be a certain kind of joy and satisfaction that you possess that is going to elude many other people that chase after all those different things in life that they think are going to make them happy. But the book doesn't leave us there. It doesn't leave us with the picture of the meaningless life. Although it does acknowledge that is a reality, that the repetitive, monotonous nature of life is something that's true, and it's something that is not really, it's not something that we're going to be able to overcome. It's something that we learn to put in its proper context. But where does the book of Ecclesiastes actually leave us? So what is the point of this futile life? I picked out a few verses that would I think point us in a good direction as we close out. So chapter 2, verses 24 and 25. Would somebody read those for us?
Sure. Man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment?
Yeah, and this is immediately after the section where he talks about how he tried toil. You look at verse 18, I hated all the things I toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. In other words, I work hard and then somebody inherits it. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they have control over all the fruit of my toil, which I had poured into my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over my toilsome labor in the sun. So all this time he's working hard, he's building up wealth and fortune and possessions, and then he realizes you can't take it with you, and there's no U-Hauls behind a hearse, all these kinds of things that you've heard before. He remembers all of these things, and he finds that a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. So enjoy the work that you do and live a simple, content life with it. Also, toward the end of the book, look at chapter 11, verse 9. Somebody read chapter 11, verse 9.
Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee unto judgment.
Okay, yeah, thanks, James. So we've got enjoy life, particularly while you're young, is the idea here in this passage. You who are young, let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart, whatever your eyes see. But know for all these things God will bring you into judgment. So it's a message of enjoying life and contentment, but also living it in the context of knowing that God is going to judge and bring and hold us all to account for the ways that we choose to live. So it's not a message of excess and nihilistic pleasure and say, oh, nothing matters, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and everything really is meaningless, so I can go sin and commit adultery and do anything that I want, because that's what Ecclesiastes is telling me, right? No, he says, enjoy life in the proper context, because knowing that God is going to call us to account. And then the very end of the book, chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. Before we get there, we were just talking about how he's talking about how to enjoy life when you're young, because this is what he says it happens when you get old. In the beginning of chapter 12, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. So, I mean, maybe you know people that have grown older and they say, I find no pleasure in these years anymore. He says, before the sun and light and the moon and stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop. So the ladies that used to keep the house, they're trembling now, and the strong men who used to be strong, now they're crouched over. Here's the next one, when the grinders cease because they are few. Now, this is actually a pretty funny verse, because a lot of people assume that means like the workers that grind at the mill. But I think there's a good argument to be made that he's actually talking about teeth here. So the grinders the grinding teeth, they're gone. So there's few teeth in the mouth, and they can't chew the food anymore. And those looking through the windows grow dim, and that's a picture of bad eyesight. Yeah, so that's why I think it refers to the teeth there. When the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades, when people rise up at the sound of birds, but all the songs grow faint. So this is a picture of life, and how there's so much promise and expectation when you're young, and then as you grow older and you go through the years, that there is just a frustration and a realization that life is short and that it's not going to last forever, and all the optimism that may have existed when I was younger, that's kind of gone.
One of my notes for 12:2-5 says, Solomon poetically pictures old age as a gathering storm, as an old house, and as an old man.
Yeah. So really powerful message in this book. I really like how it pictures life, and just to focus on be content with what God has given you, the time that He's given you, that life is repetitive, that all these things, none of them are really going to satisfy. So don't chase after them as if that's going to be the end of your satisfaction. It's in looking to God and being content with what He's blessed.
12:1 really also exhorts young people.
Yep.
Really, youth.
Yep.
To remember God in their youth and before the days of trouble.
Yeah. And then you get to the very end, in chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. He says, now all has been heard. And here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. So those last two verses really bring the rest of the book back into context. That it's saying, yes, be content, yes, enjoy life, chase after these things in their proper context, pleasure, money, work, friends, all of the pleasures that life has for you, enjoy them in the correct proportion, not taking them to sinful excess, realizing that God is going to call us to account. But as you do that, realize and be honest with yourself that you are just a small part of this generation, what's happening in this world today, and that this generation is going to pass on and we'll all be forgotten. People won't remember our names.
We're like that little grain of sand. That one little grain. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is very depressing.
It's meaningless.
Well, that's what Facebook is for, so that we remember this to the next generation and next and next.
Yeah, like a lot. I was talking with another pastor about this a few years ago, and he said, "I don't think I could ever preach on the book of Ecclesiastes because it's just so depressing." And I said, I love the book. I preached on it back in Severn. We went through the whole book, and just seeing the idea of a life in proper perspective, lived under God's sight, content with what He's given us.
And if
I
this was,
actually find it to be a really encouraging message.
and if this was Solomon, I mean, the richest of the richest,
Mhm.
even someone like that could think like this and then still come to the conclusion that it's all about God, that's pretty invigorating thought.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's, when you hear,
Wise as there was the wisest man on earth, now and back then, forever, right?
short of, yeah, except for Jesus, I would say.
Well, yeah. Way to go.
It was all meaningless. Yeah.
I can say, oh, this is
And I'm laughing at you.
that's what you get for picking on Jesus the whole time.
And, you know,
Yeah, because Jesus is the fulfillment of Solomon's wisdom.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, the wisdom of Solomon is supposed to be the wisdom high point of all creation that points forward to Jesus. So yeah.
I can't
and
help but
then
think
you get
that
laid off.
having that kind of
What's left?
wisdom,
Or you
like drove him crazy
Mm.
at the end of his life because he falls off into idolatry, and
That was
then we have this. Like, how could our brains handle such wisdom? You know,
Mm.
6'6" and cat.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's conjecture. But
Well, yeah, I mean,
it seems like he's just going crazy.
Maybe he used 50% of his brain.
Well, we all use
Such a misnomer.
Is there any, I don't know, thought that maybe this is like his eulogy? It seems like he may not have written it because it's kind of in third person about the teacher was wise, whatever.
Right.
And seems to me, if this is towards the end of his life, he was pretty bitter, in spite of his conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why bother doing anything? It's meaningless. Why bother striving? The only reason not to be foolish is because you'll live in poverty and be miserable, but at the end of the day, you're working hard and toiling, and you'll be miserable anyway, because you're going to come to the same end as the fool.
You're just making it worse, sir.
So what's the point?
Well,
That's,
I think like
You know,
he
if you're-
said, keeping it in perspective, anything and everything that
Well, I
you
think
do.
doing all of
if
those
you're being
things-
honest about life, that's true from a human perspective about what this life has to offer. Is that it's frustrating and it's repetitive, and it seems like no matter what you achieve, no matter how far you get, there's always more to conquer. And when do you actually arrive? So if you are looking at life like there's something outside of God, there's possessions or pleasures or riches or work attainment that's going to get me to the point that I want to be, then you're setting yourself up for continual disappointment. And that's almost like the picture of the book and what it's saying. So if you can remember that those things are what they are and keep them in their proper perspective, and that you can enjoy life for what it is, then that's where joy and a life that's pleasing to God, as you remember His sovereignty and His judgment over life, is going to be found. So, I mean, it's a warning in some ways. It's a, I did all this dumb stuff so you can avoid it, that type of picture. And it's a great statement against the pleasures of this world that seem like they're going to satisfy us. And we think, oh, if I could just be famous, or if I could just have this much money, or if I could just be the boss and tell everybody else what to do, if I could run the company, then I would really be then I'd be happy. That's what life would really be all about. So,
But it's not all that it's knocked up to be, so to speak. Let me tell you.
yeah, I mean, I really pointed commentary from Jim Carrey one time a couple years ago about how everybody thinks
Not the comedian.
that, the comedian,
Oh,
that everybody thinks if they could just be famous, that they would be happy. And he said, try it and you'll see that it's actually, in a lot of ways, a path to misery.
Yeah, he's just as miserable as we all are.
Many of the,
All
many,
of us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you see that a lot of times in people that are,
Well, look at
people's-
Madonna. Look at Madonna. She's constantly searching. Nothing is good enough. I mean, it's, what's around the next bend? Her ego is so big, it's so empty. She needs God in it, without question. I mean, if
That
you
would
see her
fix it.
quotes and what she does,
That
that's
would
a
fix
great
it.
example, I think.
Yep.
Well, that's why so many of them turn to drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
That's why they can't stay married. Robin Williams committed suicide.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
Yeah, those
they
tragic
can never.
pictures. It seems like they have everything, wealthy, famous,
Just goes back to there's nothing new under the sun, look at Alexander the Great. When did he go to cry because he didn't have no more, couldn't conquer nobody. He conquered everybody.
yeah,
So he was not satisfied with himself.
there you go.
So-
There's nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
So,